welcome new recruits to Cementics. At Cementics, we help clean out diseased mountains and harvest various rare stones. In this training video for miners, myself and other doctors will go over the basics of pulp and cementum and what to do if you encounter calcification. When you first enter the canal, be sure you have on the proper PPE, such as your vest and your hard hat. These will help protect you from unwelcoming stones and other critters that you'll encounter. Now, to enter Mount Cuspid, we'll have to dig into the ground to access the opening of the mountain called the apical foramen. We'll ride an elevator down to this apical foramen. On our way there, you'll see the underground portion of the mountain, and we call this the root. Now, covering the entire root is an amber-like structure. We call this cementum. You'll need to break through this in order to access the pulp. To do this, you need to use your pickaxe in just the right areas. In order to find those areas, you'll need to learn all about the cementum. Dr. Blast will start us off with how the cementum forms.
Thank you. Let's start with cementogenesis, which means the origin and formation of cementum. Cementum covers the entire roof of the mountain and is deposited in layers. The first layer of cementum deposited on the roof surface is called intermediate cementum. I have taken samples back to my lab and found that it is a homogeneous, thin, non-cellular layer which originates from the inner epithelial root sheath cells. Now, this deposition occurs before the hairy epithelial root sheath cell layer disintegrates. When this degradation occurs, it allows contact of the forming mountain sac cells with the dentin surface, which induce the formation of cementoblast cells. These cells build cementum. Cementoblasts cover the dentin on the roof of the mountain and start the process of cementogenesis, laying down of non-calcified cementoid on the intermediate cementum. Cementoblasts, which originate from periodontal ligament, begin to form increments of cementum along the root surface. The matrix is now called cementoid. The periodontal ligament are fibers that connect the mountain to the ground. Open up the cementoid, cementum is finally formed. While the cementum is forming, the central cells of the mountainal papilla form the pulp. Because cementum is formed in layers, there will be incremental lines. These growth lines are parallel to the long axis of the root. The oldest layer of cementum will be found right next to the dentin, while the most recent layer lies next to the periodontal ligament. To find the right areas, look for spots where the cementum is not as thick. Now, when you're chipping away at layers of cementum, there are two types that you will see depending on where you're chipping. The acellular type will be the thinnest layer at the CEJ, close to where the crown and the roof of the mountain meet. There is at least one layer over all of the roof with many layers near cervical 1/3. It is formed at a slower rate with no embedded cementocytes, and the width constant over time. However, the cellular is thickest at the mountain apex and interradicular area of multi-rooted mountains. It is formed after the acellular layer and can also be layered over the acellular, which happens mainly in the apical 1/3, especially interradicular region. The cellular form at a fastest rate with embedded cementocytes. Now moving on Dr. Shepard will go over what to do if there is hypercementosis.
Thanks, Dr. Blast. Hypercementosis means an overgrowth of cementum at the root apex. To determine if there is hypercementosis, you'll need to pull out your portable X-ray machine and take a small X-ray of the area you plan to excavate. Like a Polaroid, it will print out the radiograph instantly. On the radiograph, the hypercementosis will appear white or radiopaque and bulbous. It normally occurs around the roots of the mountain within the PDL space. It is also called cementum hyperplasia and may appear on only one or on the mountains surrounding that root area. Now, the cause of this is not fully known, but it is thought to be from trauma to the roots, like an earthquake. If the mountain was really diseased and we needed to extract it, this extra cementum would prove a tricky problem, as it would lock the mountain in place, making our job very difficult. In order to break through this hypercementosis, you'll need to use your mega pickaxe. Now, you might not understand why the mountain's root is covered in cementum. Well, lucky for you, Dr. Tomes will go over the functions of cementum.
Thanks for the info, Dr. Sharpie. The first role of the cementum is that it serves as an attachment for the PDL fibers. This helps to anchor a mountain and retain it in the earth. It also surrounds dentinal tubules and acts as a seal to prevent dentinal fluid flow and the pain associated with hydrodynamic theory. In the event of attrition, cementum forms at the apical and fixation areas to compensate for loss of occlusion, creating thicker areas of cementum. But wait, there's even more. The cementoblasts also have formative functions. So if there's an injury, they can form reparative cementum. And then, after you break through the cementum and the dentin, you will see a cave. And in that cave resides many creatures, collectively called the pulp. Dr. Schwann will now go into more detail about this vicious pulp.
Thank you, Dr. Tomes. I'm Dr. Schwann, and we'll be talking all things pulp. First things first, when you enter into the cave, the pulp's going to be everywhere, so please be careful what you touch. Pulp is very fragile, and it shouldn't be disturbed. Now, the pulp creatures, they live in this red, jello-y slime. Some of the creatures include loose connective tissues, blood vessels, nerves, and cells. Now, in bigger mountains like Mount Molar, the pulps are about 4 times as larger than the pulp of Mount Incisor. Now, these creatures had a big war a couple years back about what was most important. Since they couldn't come to a decision, this resulted in a division of 2 groups, coronal and radicular. The coronal pulp are obsessed with jewelry, such as crowns, which can only be found in the crown of the mountain. However, the radicular pulp, they're obsessed with rad waves that are found only in the canals of the mountain. There are also 4 zones or regions of the pulp. So first, the outermost layer of the pulp is made of odontoblast cells, and it's referred to as the odontogenic zone. Second, we have the cell-free zone or zone of whale. Now, cells don't like to hang out in this layer for too long due to its gross texture. This area contains several bundles of reticular fibers, as well as capillaries and nerves. nerves. Third, we have the cell-rich zone. This is the party zone. Lots of cells like to hang out here. It has a high cell density that is mainly fibroblasts and mesenchymal cells. As we remember, mesenchymal cells have the ability to become odontoblasts, fibroblasts, or macrophages, depending on what job needs to be done. Lastly, but not least, we have the fourth layer, which is the pulp core. This is kind of like the parents of the pulp who provide the main support for the surrounding pulp zones, and they also contain the subodontic plexus of nerves. Okay, you might think the pulp is gross, but it's actually very important and imperative to the health of the mountain, which Dr. Hertwig will now go into depth about.
Thanks, Dr. Schwann. My name is Dr. Hertwig, and I am a specialist of the pulp of the mountain. For this part of the mountain, you're going to need your hard hat and your vest to stay protected. So, let's go and get into the pulp. The first reason the pulp is so important is because it provides vitality to the mountain. The second reason is because it has formative function, where odontoblasts of the pulp produce dentin, which surrounds and protects the pulp from outside critters. Another function is the protective function. This gives the pulp the ability to respond to stimuli, which can include pressure or temperature, both hot and cold. If injured, the pulp can transmit an ouch signal to the brain, which keeps the mountain alive. The nutritive function enables the pulp to carry nutrition and oxygen to the mountain when it's under development. Last function is the reparative function. This happens when the pulp responds to an injury by inducing the formation of reactionary and reparative dentin. This can slow the rate of decay and form a barrier between the irritants. Super important. Now, sometimes a stone can be formed, which is made up of valuable materials which we can mine. That's why I need the hard hat. However, not all mountains have these pulp stones, which is why they're so valuable. The stones can also be called denticles. The technical term is denticles. The stones are often irregular or round-shaped, frequently found in the pulp of the mountains that have experienced trauma. They can also lie free in the dirt, attached or embedded in the dentin. The size will increase with the age of the mountain. The stones are of little importance to the health of the mountain, other than they may interfere with the endodontic treatment. There are actually two different classifications of these stones. There's true denticles or false denticles. True denticles resemble dentin and have dentinal tubules like the dentin. However, false denticles have concentric layers of calcified tissue. In the center, there may be a group of cells that appear necrotic, which is a fancy word for dead. So, these stones are classified based on the location to dentin. There are free, which are in the pulp. There are attached to dentin, and there is embedded, which are in the dentin. So, once we mine any stones, we're gonna go ahead and continue our journey to scan the mountain for any disease. Climbing up the root canal, you're gonna need to get out your climbing gear to start your ascent. In this scenario, we didn't find any disease which manifests like little black blobs on the walls of the canal. Now, we go back down through the root, through the hole that we created through the cementum. We'll now seal the hole with a thick paste that will set after a couple minutes. After it sets, we're going to go ahead and ride the elevator back up and seal the other hole with dirt. Now, this concludes our exploration/mine of Mount Cuspid.
Congratulations! You have completed the training video. But before you go, let's test your knowledge with a trivia question. Which type of cells deposit the cementum? Is it A, cementoblast? Is it B, cement? Is it C, blasts? Or is it D, fibroblasts? Nothing gets past you. You are right. It is A, cementoblast. Thank you for your support in helping us mine and rehabilitate mountains everywhere. Now you can safely say, you know, the drill. Tune in next time where we go over removing the deadly disease, cavities.